Okay, number 27. Pat has two kinds of plant food, quick grow and super grow. What would be the best way for Pat to find out which plant food helps a particular type of house plant grow the most? Um, put some quick grow on a plant in the living room, put some super grow on a plant in the same type in the bedroom, and see which one grows the most. Find out how much each kind of plant food costs because the more expensive kind is probably better for growing plants. Put some quick grow on a few plants, but put the same amount of super grow on a few other plants of the same type. Put all the plants in the same place, see which group of plants grows the most. Look at the advertisements for quick grow, look at the advertisements for super grow, and see which ones say it helps plants grow the best. Okay, you don't want A because it could be two different types of environments, and one room may not even have windows where it would get any sunlight. You don't want to base um, productivity on cost. C is going to be your best bet because you're putting uh, both kinds of fertilizer on different number of plants, but you're kind of keeping them in the same place to make sure that's going to get the same amount. They'll get the same amount of sunlight. They'll be in the same temperature. And then we all know what people can do for false advertisement. So C is your better answer here. What are the variables that keep an experiment fair? It means there's only, everything is going to be the same. That would be the controls. Identify the independent and dependent variables in an experiment will help you better interpret and convey results. What's the difference between the independent and dependent variables in an experiment? Remember, independent variables is you can say this is what I change. So independent variables always a number, dependent's never a number. Independence what's altered, dependence what's measured. Dependent the investigator controls, independent is the result. Dependence found in the first column and the independence in the second column. So you can mark D off. Dependent is the result. You can mark C off. We don't always know that they're going to be a number. It could be a color, for a result. So B is your better answer. B is what's being altered or what you're changing, and D is the result. Dependent is the result. School physician performed an experiment to investigate the effects of aerobic exercise on high school freshmen. He examined 25 student volunteers and found them to be in good health. He then had the students perform aerobic exercises such as jogging, swimming, bicycling. The doctor recorded the students' pulse rates before each activity, during the activity, and after each activity. What is the independent variable in this experiment? In other words, what is he changing? Okay, the students' health seemed to be good. He had the same number of volunteers. The independent is what they're changing. The pulse rates were a result. So what they were changing was the aerobic exercise. That's your independent variable because it could have been swimming, jogging, bicycling, and that is doing something. They're having to change something other than sitting or standing or walking. Which of the following is a good way to analyze data? Check over and copy it. Put it away for a few months, see if it makes sense later. Organize it into charts, graphs, do calculations. Find some way to make it support your hypothesis. So if you're going to analyze something, you're going to try to organize it, and by putting numbers into charts and graphs makes them easier to understand. Below is a bar graph on candy allowance compared to the child's happiness. What's the dependent variable? So they're going to vary candy and see if it makes the child happy. So daily, the child rates himself as being at a 5. So more than once a week, they're up to an 8. If they get candy weekly, 8 or 9. More than once a month, monthly, couple times a year, almost never. How often do you eat candy? Average of happiness. So they're trying to figure out if candy affects a child's happiness. So the happiness they're trying to prove depends on candy. So the average level of happiness is the dependent variable. In general, how might choosing a small sample size affect a scientific investigation? Finish the following sentence. A smaller sample size is more precise than a large sample size, not as reliable as a larger sample size, easier to control than a larger sample, has fewer dependent variables than a large sample. Basically, it is not as reliable as a large sample. So if you're wanting to do a poll, the more people you ask a question about something, the more numbers you have, the more likely you're going to get the average of the group. If you wanted to poll, 1,000 people on the type of favorite pizza they have versus asking 1,000,000 people what's their favorite pizza, you're going to get a better average of favorite pizza asking a larger sample. The results are going to be better. Which statement about controlled experiments is correct? No. A is wrong because you always want controlled experiments. Test one variable at a time. Test more than one variable. Do not contain an experimental group. So this one here, B, is your better answer. It's controlled because you're eliminating all the possibility things of things changing the results except one. Which of the following could be an observation and an investigation? Oil is not a good solvent for salt. The oil did not dissolve the salt sample. With enough mixing, the oil will probably dissolve salt. Oil deep beneath the surface of the earth could leach salt from the rocks. So what's an observation? The oil did not dissolve the salt sample, so you could actually see the oil not dissolving it. Through what process do scientists make sure that each other's work is valid and true? That would be peer reviewing and reproducing experiments. Which of the following is an inference? You believe that a tree has 43 rings by counting them. You believe the temperature is 75 degrees by checking the thermostat. You believe that the moon has craters when you look through a telescope. You believe it rained when you see a mud puddle. That's an inference. You don't have proof of it because here you can see the craters. Here you can check the thermometer. You can count the rings. Those are things that you can do or measure. Seeing a mud puddle, you're going to assume it rained, but you didn't know that somebody might have dumped a bucket of water there. So that's an inference. Which of the following is not a source of bias in scientific investigations? Leaving out a control group, introducing personal prejudice, reporting on only the most interesting data, submitting a paper for peer review. Which of the following is not a source of bias in scientific investigations? It would be D, because you're asking people for their opinions there. All right, I'm going to stop this video and we'll do one more.